So I have a pleasure to introduce Lexi Mills. Lexi, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. So I've been working across a multitude of brands over the last few years, everything from really big clients all the way through to the smaller ones. I think one of the key things I want to open with is saying, you know what? It's not the really big, sexy brands that are the most fun. I've had far more fun working on things like bathrooms.com and payment apps and debt management firms than I ever did working for people like Red Bull, because you get a lot more freedom to be creative. And my job has been primarily getting coverage and building links from websites like the ones you can see here. So today I'm going to talk to you about my top 5 PR SEO tips and tricks and strategies for building links, but also building brands. Because as the algorithms shift from us just building any kind of link to us building big links, we actually became brand managers at the same time as being SEO. So it's important to remember that when you're getting these big links, it's a reflection on the brand identity. And if you look at the sort of Fortune 500 companies, 75% of their value is in their brand identity, not in their assets. So it's really important that we're conscious of that when we're doing our link building. Now, I'm going to begin by talking through who should own ideation, because it's an argument I see happening time and time again. Packaging content for success. And then I'm going to show you some of my outreach tips and talk a little bit about team integration, and I'll conclude talking about SEO and brand. So who should own content ideation? Well, this is a really big question. And my view is it ends up being like this bomb that we pass around. Somebody starts with an idea and then hands it on to someone else to do the research. Then they hand it on to promotions, and they get left being essentially the person holding the bomb at the end if it goes wrong. Now, I find this kind of odd. It's a unique aspect of the SEO industry that's kind of always confused me, because traditionally in PR, most of the time, the people promoting it are involved in the ideation. And that means you don't get the separation of responsibility. And so there is ultimate ownership. But also when you created something, you have a natural passion for it. And that means that you're going to promote it with that little bit more zest and integrity. And that integrity is felt through every element of the promotions that you do. So I'd really encourage you to not have these separations between someone going off and coming up with ideas and then passing this bomb down the line. It also means that the learnings throughout the outreach process that comes from journalists saying, oh, we can't publish that because it's in the wrong dimensions, or it's not, it conflicts with X or Y schedule. You will have all that information that goes back into your next content piece to make it stronger. Equally, if you are going to do this, if you are going to hand it over from one team to the other, saying that it's going to fit on the New York Times or the Guardian, that's not sufficient. To me, that is an awful handover, and I would hand it right back. I don't want to know that it's going on the New York Times or it'll fit there. I want to know that it's going to fit on the technology section of the New York Times. I also want to know that my ideation team has looked at the articles on the technology section of the New York Times and says to me, hey, on average, they're 441 words in length. And this piece of content allows for someone to write an article of 441 words in length. If they don't know that, again, I will hand it back. Because often you'll get handed a piece of content, and when you look at it, you're like, I'm not sure how I write more than 3 words about this. It's got 1 or 2 findings, but not enough for a whole article. And then you wonder why you're not getting full articles. And if you know that, that's fine. You can build it into your strategy. If it's not going to be a news article in its own right, then you're pitching for features, you're pitching for roundups, you're pitching for it to be part of a wider story. And that massively changes what your outreach strategy looks like, from who you target all the way through to your emails. So these 2 factors, if someone hands something over to me like with the right word length and telling me exactly what sections the content fits on, then we've got a working process. Equally, if they say to me, hey, Lexi, I think this is a great story, but it's going to work best in images, and as such, I've got you a selection of screenshots of this interactive graphic working, then I know I'm going to picture editors, and I'm going to all the journalists that make those little scroll boxes. You see them a lot on Huffington Post. You can kind of click through the images, and they're kind of a picture story. That's also fine, as long as the ideation team has considered that, because that will change how much time and effort and budget you're willing to put into the aesthetics of a design piece. Sometimes the design is really not the core part of the story, the research or the findings are. But those are really key to how you hand over from an ideation team to a PR team. Equally, if you look at the trending topics across most websites, you're not going to see a lot of difference. Why? Because they're all going for clicks. Clicks are really important. This is a question that I found on, I'm part of a journalist group, and someone said, do you think editorial has become more tied to revenue and traffic in the last 10 years? And if so, how? And how do you feel about that? And the response was, yes, traffic pays the bills. So it means you might cover something clickbaity that you might prefer to ignore, which means these trending topics are really important. So when I'm getting a handover, if someone says to me, these are the 4 trends that we see this linking into, that tells me exactly what kind of things I need to put in my subject line and the buzzwords I need to say on my phone calls to get that pickup. That to me is a stellar handover. And of course, as a PR, I can go off and find those, but they really should be embedded at the very beginning of the ideation process. Equally, you can look at regional events. So International CES is the Consumer Electronics Show. If I'm looking for a trend, I don't have to look at things that are already trending. I can say, hey, let me go to the industry sector like technologies, key events, and see what subject matter was coming out. What was on the speaker list, what was on the topics that were being discussed, and what was coming out of the coverage. If you know that, for example, CES happens in January, those trends will happen throughout the year. So you can get them before they're actually trending. And again, someone saying to me, hey, I looked at all the international tech shows, these 4 things look like they were going to be popular, and our content ties into that. That's super helpful to me. You can also test content ideas through using your media database. So this is a screenshot of Gorkana. And a client came to me a few months ago saying they had a piece of content about windsurfing. They had noticed that no one had done a really good piece around windsurfing, and there was a lot of search volume and it was going to work really well for the client. Well, I just went into Gorkana, and you can see in the top corner here, I typed in windsurfing. 3 publications came up. Right, okay. So then I typed in water sports. And I was like, hundreds of publications come up. So I went back to the ideation team and I said, you need to widen this piece. You can be really detailed on windsurfing, but it needs to cover water sports in a more general form as well. And then I have not 3, but 300 publications I can go to. And it's very easy for us to just use our media databases for contacts. But really, if we use them in the ideation process, it can be a great way to vet an idea. If you have 4 or 5 ideas and you're not sure which ones to go forward with, this is a great starting point, which is another reason why I think these teams should be completely integrated or the same team. That being said, there's nothing wrong with getting your content ideation team learning how to use these pieces of software so they can do this before they hand over to you. You can also do this with regional mapping. So Gorkana has this system where you can go and put in a postcode or an area, and then it will show you how many newspapers and publications cover that area. Which again, if you're going regional, often you'll get these big national pieces, but some regions only have 2 or 3 publications. If you're on a small budget, tight time scale, you might say, you know what? I'm going to just promote to the 3 biggest regions where I've got the most amount of media, and then I'll go down to the smaller tiers. But your regional mapping system will help you in doing that. And it will also help you determine where you might want to do the extra research, because we can't always justify research into the smaller areas. So unless you know there's a lot of publications you can target, you can turn around to the content team and say, hey guys, focus on Manchester, London, and Newcastle. And later on, if we get interest from the smaller regional areas, we'll go to them. Now, packaging content for success is something that I feel like we can just all do. There's so many elements of content creation and ideation and outreach that we can't fully control. But this is one of those almost formulaic things that just helps me sleep at night. If I get this right, I know I'm setting myself up for success. And the key thing here is Dropbox. It's not rocket science, but if you put everything in a Dropbox, it means a journalist can come home late from an event, think to themselves, I'm going to have to get up and hit my article quota the next morning, and I don't know what I'm going to write about, and I'm exhausted. And then I'll think, Lexi Mills sent me a pitch this morning, and I know Lexi always gives me everything in a Dropbox. And so they can draft an article in the evening, ready to go live in the morning, so they can have that little bit of a lie-in if they want, or spend more time chasing different sources for another story. Now, you don't need loads of stuff in here, but I tend to put my base content, which can be a press release, doesn't have to be, but just some key content about your article. You want your images in 72 and 300 dpi, links to any videos, bios of anyone who's important. So if you've got a spokesperson, you will want to have a biography about who they are and why they're important. And a little section about the business, just a little paragraph, and then a Q&A. So what does it show? What does it not show? Where is it strong? Where is it weak? What are the key findings? How is the research done? But if that's all there, somebody at any time of night can go and write your story, and they don't need to contact you back. Because if they have to ask you for things, unless it's groundbreaking, it's probably just going to sink to the bottom of their inbox and other pitches are going to come in. It's also really important to think about liability. This is something we've had a big change in over the last few years. As publications have gone from being regional, such as UK-focused publications, and then an American-focused publication for CNET or for Wired, they're now becoming global. And what's happened in that process is that the European teams have now become subject to the American contract laws of being a journalist. And that means that they hold both personal and transferable liability. So if you give them a story and it's got inaccurate information and they publish it, they are personally liable for that. And if their publication gets sold, they can also still be prosecuted by the new publication.
So I was just summarizing that journalists these days increasingly hold both personal and transferable liability for the accuracy of their content. This isn't consistent across all groups, but certainly so on the US side, increasingly so for European journalists who are working for companies that are being bought out by US entities. So it's really important that you fact check and substantiate your content. And I know sometimes there's one data source that is the pivot of everything, and you can't find something rocking or something really government-based to back it up with, but it's really worth putting in the time and effort there because it will massively increase your chances of outreach. Now, let's have a quick look at some outreach tips. So firstly, I'm a big believer in doing a lot in the pre-launch phase. So that's drafting your media materials, prospecting, and then doing a soft sell-in to either your news and your picture agencies. These are people that function a lot like national news desks. They actually get paid by national news if national news take the stories they send out. So always give them your stories ahead of time. Then I'll do a little bit of a soft selling into media. So I'll call a couple of contacts that I know the story is just perfect for, and I'll try and confirm my exclusives, which means hopefully on the day of launch, you're feeling a lot more confident because you've already know you've got a couple of pieces in the bag. And then on launch day, that's when you start selling into your news desks. Thereafter, you can progress to selling into sort of wider media, aiming for features, but we don't always have to get everything on launch day. It's important to spread that out over a period of time. It'll be better for you, but it's also better for your client's mentality, knowing that there are things coming before. Then you've got your big launch where you hope to get the majority of your coverage, but there's also things that are going to trickle in thereafter. And it's important to read the publications that you're pitching to. I know it's difficult to be completely abreast with every element of every publication you pitch, but I just encourage everyone just to do a flick through the website. It takes 5 minutes. You don't even need to do a full 5 minutes, but just get a general gist of how it's structured, what type of language they use. You can get it so quickly. You don't need to be an expert in every publication, but just doing those 2.5 to 5 minutes worth of homework before you make a phone call makes the world of difference. So give yourself a break. Don't get up every morning and read every single publication on the internet, but make sure that you have actually looked at their websites. The amount of times I see people pitching and they haven't looked at the website and they miss something that's staring them in the face. There's nothing more annoying to a journalist. And these are my preferred headphones. You can actually see I'm wearing them now. If you stand up and pitch, it will be felt. It's like if you smile on the phone, it will travel down the phone. It's a typical sales trick, but get yourself a great pair of headphones and make sure you're standing when you pitch. The energy will come through the phone call. And tell them what your subject line of your email will be. It sounds so silly, but I heard this technique when I was working in a PR firm, and it makes such a difference. As you conclude the phone call, say, I'm going to send you an email now with all the details. The subject line will be blah, blah, and blah. And then they know what they're looking for. So small, but the pickup rate goes up dramatically. And put your trending terms in the subject line. I mean, these should have been given to you in the handover. Very small, but a lot of journalists, if they're writing on a trend, will be scanning their inbox for that trending term. So it's just another way of getting somebody to open your email. And remember that mornings are best, but it's a global world. Most publications are global now. So if you call a journalist in the UK or Berlin or Germany and they're not receptive, just wait a few hours. And then you can call New York journalists. And a few hours later, you can start to call journalists in San Francisco. And they might all be working for the same publication. But over time, you'll get a little bit of feedback from your phone calls. They'll just help you tweak your pitch and get it just right. But don't feel like if you don't get the first journalist in your time zone that you can't use the morning of another journalist. And actually, after a morning's worth of pitching, your confidence goes up. And in the same way, standing up and smiling makes a big difference when you're pitching. So does confidence. And we can't all fake it until we make it. Sometimes you have to really feel stronger about your pitch, and a couple of good receptions early on in the day will increase your success rate as you chase the sunrise across the world. Now, there's a massive growth in freelance journalism. So I would urge you to be a little bit cautious when you're writing or speaking to journalists when you're saying, hey, I think this would be perfect for X or Y publication. I would be more inclined to say, hi, I know you write for a bunch of publications and I thought this would fit a couple of them, because you don't know who's contracting them at that point in time. Journalists are jumping all over the show depending where the money is going. And if you say you think it will be perfect for X publication, they might be too busy to think, oh, actually, it might also work for this one too. So just give yourself that little bit of breathing room and the opportunity to get it in several places. And keep in mind that some journalists have their own blogs. So I'm pitching a technology project at the moment, and I know that a couple of the journalists I'm pitching to also have their own blogs. So I'm very open to them writing about it on their own blog if they can't get it past their editor for their main publication. When to mail merge? Now, I would argue there is a time to mail merge. If you have a very key news piece and it's timely and you're sending it to news desks, I think it's okay to mail merge. It's you don't need to fake that it's unique. When you're sending to a news desk, you don't know who you're getting. The news desks rotate. So just make sure that it's very quick, very concise. I thought this would make a good news piece because of blah, blah, and blah. All the details are here. It's very important that you put all those details into the body of the email. You know, your pitch can be very short, but then you just have a line and put the rest of the details below. And of course, the link to the Dropbox. Spamming is not what we're aiming for, but there is a time and place. If you have a really good story, I was promoting a story around King George's birth a couple of years ago, and the stats I had were super timely. If I hadn't got that out, we would never have got the level of coverage that we had. And I had 5 people pitching, but it was critical that I got that to news desks on time. And don't try to win on round 1. This is probably my strongest tip of all time. If you aim to win on pitch 3, approach 3 with a journalist, you'll probably win on pitch 2. But we always try and get an answer straight away. We want an answer to our first email, our first phone call. It kind of makes us seem a little needy. Actually, build someone up. Say, hey, I've got a story coming. I think you'll like it. It's around this and this. Is there anything you're going to want ahead of time? What's your preferred date? Do you have anything coming up that it fits with? And then go back to them with the final pitch and all the details when it's about to go live. And you can even follow up thereafter. I'm not an advocate of hassling journalists, but when we try and win on round 1, we feel under pressure, and so do they. So let's have a little talk about team integration. We kind of think of it like this beautiful ballet, and it's not. It looks a lot more like this, right? Team integration, there's no standard protocol or process for doing it. We're all kind of screwing it up a little bit. There's been a lot of history between PR and SEO teams, which hasn't been all that pretty. And really, we just need to approach it with fresh eyes and a good attitude. And the first thing I can say is that one of the greatest challenges to online marketing is the internal communication. If we can be really open and understanding and get people talking to us about why they don't want to support from the PR team, why they don't want to support from the social media team, then we stand a chance of making progress. And that works with the 3-step process as well. Don't try and get the social media team at a big client supporting your project first round. Just aim to open the conversation. If you push for too much too soon, you'll end up jousting the very people that will be able to help you push all your projects forward in the future. And begin small. Start with joint reporting. You can all be targeted on your different areas, but if you're all reporting on consistent metrics, what is the circulation? What is the unique website views of a piece of coverage the SEO team gets? What's the link value that the PR team's inadvertently got? If you start reporting on that, you start to build up a base level of knowledge that will help those future conversations significantly. And agree an internal sign-off process. And that's for the design and the promotion. And most importantly, get them to sign off on the sign-off process. Because if you don't do that, it will come back and get you. But if you can get people to sign off on a sign-off process, you can adapt it. You're not locked into it. But it's the beginning of you having a smooth working process. And finally, I want to conclude about talking about SEO and brand. As I said at the beginning, we need to know the brand guidelines of the clients we're working for. It's really important. We are now, if we're getting big coverage, we are affecting brand identity, and we have to take ownership and responsibility for that. And we have to behave as if we understand the ins and outs of every brand. And you will make some mistakes. Brand identity will have very clear guidelines, but there'll be ways of navigating them which will have a history of internal politics that you won't know about. But it's important to recognize that if you type in sneakers into Google, who comes up first isn't just about getting the clicks. It actually identifies that company as being a big brand. And there'll be some instances in the future where you'll be trying to get on page one, not to get the clicks, but to get the perceived brand size. And I think this is going to become increasingly more important, especially in the medical technology field. And if you look at things like best companies to work for if you're gay, well, if your company is trying to recruit, you might want to start gaming those results so that you look like an inclusive company. And best companies to work for if you're female. These are things that really help companies recruit, and making sure that a client is in those rankings, or at least raising that, is important. We're not just trying to get to page one to get all the clicks. We're trying and to convert to sales, but we need to get to page one for results that actually have an impact on the wider aspects of the business. And this is certainly where SEO skills are going to be applied in a completely unique way to how they have been before, which I think is really exciting. We get a chance to make a business really show all its colors properly online. Finally, these are my recommended books. Read Aesop's Fables. Most stories have a traditional element to them. If you understand what makes a traditional story, you'll be better at pitching. If you can say to a journalist, oh, I've got a little bit of a Cinderella story for you, and we've visualized it in an interactive infographic. Equally, the charisma myth. Being charismatic is about having an air of integrity. Understanding how you communicate and emulate that will make you better at what you do. Creativity Inc. I read recently, and I loved it, because when Pixar was developing its studio, they were solving integration problems. They were trying to solve problems constantly in how teams work together and communicated. And just understanding how other people have done it will give you a set of tools and frameworks that you can apply to your clients and to your companies internally. And amusing ourselves to death. It gives you an idea of what the future of the internet might mean for us as people and consumers, and for your clients. And I think it's important that we recognize the growing role that SEO could play in that. So finally, integrate your promotions with your ideations teams. Use your media databases to check your content ideas. Phone outreach undoubtedly works. It gives you the two-way feedback, and it can be one of your 3 touch points. Don't try to win on point one. And then consider your SERPs not just as revenue drivers, but as brand reflections. Thanks very much for your time, guys. I'm on Twitter for the next few hours. If you want to ask me questions directly, my email address is on there as well. I'm more than happy to take questions through email as well.